What Dreams May Come and A Course in Miracles overlap in haunting and beautiful ways because both explore a radical idea. The mind projects the world it experiences. The film externalizes psychological and spiritual states into landscapes. Heaven, hell, memory, guilt, longing, and love become environments. ACIM similarly teaches that perception reflects inner condition rather than objective external reality. Not in a simplistic, you create every event consciously way, but in the deeper sense that mind shapes experience through interpretation, belief, and identification. The visual worlds in the film are especially ACIM-like. Robin Williams' character, Chris Nielsen, enters a heaven shaped by his wife's paintings. That is symbolically profound. Perception becomes environment. The inner becomes outer. ACIM repeatedly points toward this. Projection makes perception. The film portrays consciousness not as trapped in fixed geography, but moving through symbolic mind states. And then there is the portrayal of hell. In the movie, hell is not primarily punishment imposed by God. It is self-generated imprisonment through guilt, grief, despair, and refusal of love. That is extremely close to ACM. The Course does not describe hell as divine vengeance. The ego's hell is psychological separation, isolation, self-condemnation, attack, hopelessness, identity fixation. Annie Nielsen becomes trapped inside her own mental anguish after unbearable grief and suicide. This is delicate territory because ACM itself contains difficult and controversial language around suicide and fear. But the deeper movement in both the film and the Course is not condemnation. It is the recognition that the mind can become so identified with suffering that it forgets love entirely. The tragedy is forgetfulness, not moral failure. And Chris's journey into hell to reach Annie becomes spiritually significant. He does not conquer hell through force. He descends through love. That is very ACM-like. The ego believes separation is solved through control, fixing, domination, or punishment. But healing comes through joining. Presence, compassion, non-abandonment. Chris refuses to leave Annie alone in her suffering, even when told she may not recognize him. That resembles the Holy Spirit's function in ACIM, remaining with the sleeping mind without condemning it. The film also captures an important ACIM insight. People often remain attached to identity structures even after death. Characters continue recreating familiar perceptions because consciousness still identifies with them. ACIM would say bodily death alone does not equal awakening. The ego is a thought system, not merely a physical condition. That is why some characters in the film remain trapped in repetitive, emotional realities. The mind continues what it believes. Another deep overlap, forgiveness as liberation from self-concept. Annie's suffering is tied to unbearable guilt and loss. She cannot receive love because she believes herself irredeemably broken. ACIM repeatedly says guilt blocks awareness of love's presence. Not because love leaves, but because guilt obscures reception. Chris eventually reaches her not by arguing metaphysics, but by joining her pain without becoming lost in it. That is psychologically wise. Real healing rarely begins with abstract philosophy alone. It begins with relational presence. And then comes one of the film's deepest spiritual moments. Chris becomes willing to stay in hell with Annie rather than abandon her. That willingness changes everything. Why? Because love without conditions interrupts separation. ACIM teaches that the miracle collapses distance. Not necessarily physical distance, psychological separation. The ego says, if you are lost, I must save myself. Love says, I will not use your suffering to reinforce separation. Then Annie begins remembering. That is central. Healing arrives through remembrance, not external acquisition. Very ACM. The Course constantly says salvation is remembering what has never truly been destroyed beneath illusion. The reincarnation ending is interesting too. ACIM itself does not emphasize reincarnation as spiritually central, though it leaves room for it conceptually. But the film uses reincarnation symbolically, another opportunity, another classroom, another movement toward love. The deeper issue is not how many lifetimes exist, but whether consciousness awakens from separation. And visually, the movie understands something ACIM repeatedly points toward. Mind is creative. Fear creates landscapes. Love creates landscapes. Belief structures experience. The world is not emotionally neutral to the perceiver because perception is participatory. Still an important nuance, ACM would probably soften some of the movie's literalism around afterlife geography. The Course consistently redirects from cosmic architecture toward present moment healing of perception. The real heaven is restored awareness of love. The real hell is identification with guilt and separation, not merely locations after death. And perhaps the deepest resonance between the film and ACIM is this: no one is finally abandoned, not even in hell, not even in despair, not even in self-destruction. Love keeps extending beyond the mind's attempt to exile itself. The ego says, "You have gone too far." The miracle says, "What if separation itself was the dream?"